Hi, I am Dr. Jacob Lauritzen, and this is Read, Write, and Cite, the show where I teach you how to read, write, and cite for your college classes. In this video, I'm going to be answering the question which I see the most when I've tutored college students, and that is having problems with subject-verb agreement. So, what is subject-verb agreement? In short, subject-verb agreement is it's a rule that verbs should agree with the subject that they're describing. The basic structure for a sentence in the English language is you have a subject, a verb, and then a complete thought. And the verb and the complete thought work together to describe something about the subject. And so the verb has to match it. And what I mean by matching is, well, in every single sentence, the verbs change to match it. And the word we use is called conjugate, right? Verbs are supposed to conjugate to match the subject that they're describing. Now, verbs can also describe other nouns in the sentence, but in general, subject-verb agreement is it's a problem when your subject doesn't match the verb. Okay, so I've got a sample verb chart here. This is pretty standard. You're going to see that there are 6 different versions of the verb to jump. When you have the word to in front of a verb, we call it the infinitive, or the basic, standard, unchanged version of the verb. And if it's regular, if it's a regular verb, meaning it follows all the rules and there aren't any exceptions, then this is what it's going to look like. You're going to have singular versions of the verb and plural versions of the verb. This is where it has to match your subject, right? If your subject is singular, then you're going to choose one of these based on whether it is past tense, present tense, or future tense. And if your subject is plural, meaning it describes more than one subject, or the subject itself is plural, then you're going to use one of the bottom run, depending on whether it's past, present, or future. And that's how you get 6 different versions. Now, some of these are exact same, singular and plural, but sometimes they're different. And this is where it matters. Sometimes students get confused on whether their subject is singular or plural because they kind of lose track of where their subject is, and so they use the wrong verb. Let's look at some examples of how it should be done. Okay, so if you have a singular subject, you may say she jumped. That'd be past tense. She jumps, which would be present tense. This is the tricky one because we're used to when something is, we know when we make something plural, we add like an S or an ES to the end, right? We kind of do the opposite with our verbs though. Present tense singular verbs get an S on the end, not the plural versions, which can be confusing for students, right? That's why this is important to recognize when this conjugates or not. Okay, so that's present tense singular, and then we have future tense, she will jump. Now if we make it plural, you're going to see that there's some similarities and some differences. They, now it's a plural subject. They jumped, that'd be past tense. They jump, which does not have an S on the end for present tense because now it's plural, or they will jump because it's future tense. You with me so far? I hope so. If you have questions, you can always ask them in the comment section below, and I do my best to answer them. Okay, so let's look at a verb that doesn't follow all the normal rules, right? The verb is to run, and if we put to run in past tense, normally we would add ed on the end, but we don't say to runned. You probably noticed, why that doesn't quite sound right to you, right? It's because we have an irregular verb. That's past tense version doesn't follow the normal rules. So instead, we use ran for either singular or plural. But again, the present tense version, when it's singular, adds an S, and the plural version does not. So there's a difference there. That still follows the normal rules. depending on the verb that you're using, you just have to know which way it goes. And if you aren't sure, you can always search it on the internet, right? But in general, they have to match. Okay, now the problem students run into is oftentimes the subject and the verb kind of get separated in the sentence. When they're not next to each other, we get confused, especially if there's a word in between that is it's not the same as the subject. You know, say the subject is singular and there's a noun in between that is plural, sometimes throws us off, or the opposite can also happen. So in this case, I've got a sentence. The teacher, after teaching many classes, was ready to go home. Now, this is correct. This isn't a wrong sentence. Because what I have here is the subject, teacher, matches the word was. But sometimes students would get confused and see the words classes, which is plural, next to the word was, and they would want to put were instead because were is the plural version. But we didn't do that in this case because we were right. We remembered that teacher, but we have all these words in the middle, and sometimes that confuses people, right? That's one situation where people get confused, okay? So that's something you just got to watch out for. And as long as you recognize what your subject is and your verb is and you use the appropriate conjugation, you're going to be okay. Okay, so let's review. All right, verbs should agree with the subject they're describing. And when we say agree, it's because we're changing them to conjugate. That's the fancy word, to match the subject that they're describing. Okay, how do we do that? Well, first of all, we're going to have to recognize the subject of the sentence and make sure that the verb is conjugated correctly to match or to agree with it. That's it. That's the rule. Now, in reality, that's a little more harder to recognize, but that's the problem. So if your teacher is marking your work saying, subject-verb agreement, that's what they're talking about. I hope this video was helpful. If you have more questions, you can ask me in the comments below. You can go to our website at carpeandzen.com. Or you just, I don't know, find me on social media, anywhere at Carpe and Zen or at Dr. Lauritzen. I'd be glad to help you out. Again, I'm Dr. Lauritzen. This has been Read, Write, and Cite. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful for you. If there's a video you'd like me to make a topic on or to record a video on, you can let me know. Or maybe it's one of the other 60 plus videos I've already made on this channel. So if you like it, please consider subscribing. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.